Another large protest has been dispersed overnight by police using water cannons in Turkey's capital, Ankara. This after Wednesday saw dozens of arrests across the country as authorities bid to stop the 3 weeks-long unrest. RT's Tom Barton witnessed this latest crackdown.
This crossroads in the centre of Ankara was filled with protesters just a few minutes before. It might be hard to believe it now, it's totally empty. You can see one of the police vehicles up there still using its water cannon against the remaining few protesters. The police charged in here with 2 vehicles firing tear gas. Everyone in the square choking on that, having to dive for cover, and water cannon blasting everything around. They've left branches hanging off, trees and debris and water all over the streets. Protesters who had been gathered to try and demonstrate their anger at perceived authoritarianism by Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey, having to scatter into side streets all around here, very shocked by the sudden onrush of these police vehicles. This particular spot has marked nightly confrontations between police and protesters. Some might say, some onlookers might say, really proving what protesters might be saying, that the police really overreacting to some of the protests here. It's not quite known what exactly that set off the police, but protesters absolutely saying it's this kind of police response that has them out on the streets protesting in the first place. Mr. Erdogan and his supporters, for their part, calling some of the protesters terrorists, implicating possible foreign involvement in their funding, and saying that they don't represent a large part of the Turkish populace. He does have a fair point in that around half of the Turkish populace, polls indicate, do support him.
Well, Tom did manage to catch up with an MP for Turkey's ruling party, Çağatay Kılıç, who said police were forced to resort to tougher measures against protesters.
We have to distinguish here between protesters and troublemakers and members of illegal organizations who are trying to create havoc within the city of Istanbul and some other cities in Turkey. The police has a lawful right to use law-given means to them to disperse of these troublemakers and vandals. Now, if you're looking for a balance, I would say the police has to act within its law-given powers. That is a balance for the police. However, the citizens who are trying to use their democratic rights to protest have to do this peacefully. If you're resorting to violence and using Molotov cocktails and other kinds of weaponry against officials who are given the duty by the state to protect public order, then of course these law enforcement officers have the right to use the force that is given to them by law within the law.
Bingisu Çorakçı took part in the Ankara protests, and she says police target peaceful protesters and extremists indiscriminately.
The protest turned into like a standing protest, so people like just go and like stand and stare at a place for like, you know, a couple of minutes. That's like half an hour or an hour, and then they like, this is how we try to like continue the protest. Of course there is a fire going on, or like you know, there are some people who try to like use this situation and try to express or do extreme things. Police now doesn't differentiate like the innocent citizens just standing and using their democratic rights and the ones that they're throwing the stone.